Okay, today we're going to be reviewing the formative. Tonight's homework is to finish the formative and the cheat sheet. So here we go. And basically create a cheat sheet for your summative that is coming up next week on Tuesday. All right. So for number 1, it says simplify each expression. So you need to look for the like terms. So let's go ahead and look for like terms. Like terms are things like 5x is a like term with 1/2 x, or negative 2x, or anything that has just an x in it, okay? A different set of like terms would be like 3, negative 2, negative 100, 5, 1/5, okay? These are all constants, and they are all like terms, okay? A different set of like terms would be, let's say, y, 2y, negative 1/2 y. These are all like terms. So let's look at this first one. I see that I have a 4, and it's positive, and I have a 9, and it's positive. Those are like terms. And then I have a 5x, and it's positive. But these are not constants. Okay, so this is kind of like the blue one up there, and then these two are like the green one. So I can combine like terms. That means I can add 4 and 9. So 4 plus 9 is 13. And then I can't add 5x to it, so it's just 5x plus 13. That's my final answer. Okay, let's look at this next one. So I have a negative 3r. Do I have any other things that have an r in them? Yeah, I have another minus r, or a negative r, negative 3r. Do I have any more r's? No. So that means I need to look for other things. So let's look at this one. I have a positive 7, or plus 7. Is there any other constants or just numbers? Yeah, a minus 12. So I'm going to go ahead and write my r's together. So I have negative 3r minus 3r. Now I'm going to write my constants together. So plus 7 minus 12. Now I need to combine like terms. That means to add them together. So I have negative 3r's minus 3r. Well, that's negative 6r. Next, I have a positive 7 and a negative 12. So 7 and negative 12. So when you are thinking, when you have some positives and negatives, you have one is positive and one is negative, and you're adding and subtracting, subtract it in your head. So 12 minus 7 is 5. But do I have more negatives or more positives? I have more negatives, so that means I'm going to take away 5. So my answer would be negative 6r. Okay? So if you're having trouble with positive and negatives, you need to work on your integers. If you understand what like terms is, then good, you should be okay with it. But you need to determine, is it an integer problem or is it combining like term problem? Okay? So I'm going to help you with integers in just right now. So I have negative 3r. So that means I have 3 negatives minus 3 more negatives for this one. So how many negatives do I have altogether? 6 negatives, and that's how I got negative 6r. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, number 3. So in this case, we need to distribute. So we're going to distribute the 3 to the 4x, and then we're going to distribute the 3 to the minus 5. Okay, so 3 times 4x is this first part here. Next, I have 3 times negative 5. Okay, and I would just put a plus in between the two. Yes, there's a minus here, but I'm multiplying by negative 5, so it's just going to be adding if you include that in there. Okay, so 3, and then I need to do my second one. So I have 4 times 2x. So I'm going to put plus 4 times 2x. And then last, I have 4 times positive 6. So I'm going to add them. Okay, so let's go ahead now and multiply. So 3 times 4x is 12x. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. 4 times 2x is 8x. And then 4 times 6 is 24. Now let's combine like terms. So what are like terms? Well, I see an x here, 12x, and I also have 8x here. So these are like terms. Okay, and then I have a negative 15. And then I have a positive 24. Those are both just numbers. So those are like terms. So I'm going to put my x's first. So I have 12x plus 8x. And then I have negative 15 plus 24. Go ahead and now combine by adding. So 12x plus 8x is 20x. And then I have a negative 15 and a positive 24. Well, since I have some positives and some negatives, right, that means I need to subtract in my head. So 24 minus 15 is 9. Okay, now you have to tell yourself, do you have more positives or negatives? Well, 24 is greater than 15, so because of my absolute value, so that means that it's going to be 20x plus 9. All right, next one. Number 4. So this is the exact same thing except for it's got parentheses. So I can just rewrite it as plus a negative 3x plus 6. Okay, now I'm going to find my like terms, my x's. So I have a negative x and a negative 3x. So I'm going to write those next to each other. Now my constants. I have a positive 10 and a positive 6. Let's combine like terms. So I have negative 3x and then minus 3 more x's. So it's becoming more negative. So it'd be negative 4x. Next, I have 10 plus 6, which is 16. And that is my final answer. Let's look at this next one. So I have negative 6x plus 5 plus 4x minus 7. So this is just like before. So let's find our x's. I have negative 6x and a positive 4x. So I'm going to write them together. Now I have a positive 5 and a negative 7. So plus 5 minus 7. Those are both like terms because they're both constants. Combine like terms, so we're going to add my x's together. Those are like terms. And then I'm going to add my constants together because those are like terms. So negative 6x plus 4. Well, I have a negative and a positive. Well, since they're different signs, I'm going to subtract in my head. So 6 minus 4 is 2x. But do I have more positives or negatives? I have more negatives, so my answer is going to be negative. Let's go on to my constants. Okay, this is a positive and this is a negative. Well, I'm going to subtract in my head. So 7 minus 5 is 2. Are there more positives or negatives? Negatives. So my answer is negative 2x minus 2. Or they were adding, okay? So that means that we're adding this whole expression right here. Now, all right, next one. As you can see here, this is a little bit different. I'm going to just rewrite the negative 5x plus 4. This had a negative 1, so I'm going to distribute that negative 1 to each of them. So this would be negative x and then plus 1, because a negative 1 times a negative 1 is a positive 1. Okay, so negative, now combine like terms. So I have a negative 5x and a negative x. So I'm going to put them next to each other. And then I have a 4 and a positive 1. So plus 4 and plus 1. So negative 5x minus x is negative 6x. Then I have plus 4 plus 1. So this is plus 5. So I have negative 6x plus 5. And that is your final answer. Before this, we had addition. And the one before going, this one is a little bit different. What do you notice? Well, let's look here. There's a subtraction sign on the one to be subtracting everything that's inside here. So that means we have to put the negative here, okay? So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to write everything the same in the first expression, but now this negative, I take the opposite of the x and the opposite of the negative 7. So the opposite of x is negative x, and the opposite of negative 7, you take this whole thing right here, is a positive 7. Okay? Now we can combine like terms. So I have a negative 2x and a negative x. And then I have a negative 1 and a positive 7. So negative 2x minus x is negative 3x. And then a negative 1 plus 7 is just plus 6, right? There's more positives, so my answer is going to be positive. And I have to subtract because I have some negatives and some positives. So I need to subtract them. So that's my answer is negative 3x plus 6. So same thing on this one. On number 8, I'm going to have to take the opposite of the 8x and the opposite of the negative 1. Okay? So I have negative 8x plus 1. And then the opposite of 8x is minus 8x. And then the opposite of negative 1 is a plus 1. Now I can combine like terms. I have a negative 8x and a negative 8x. So I'm looking for the same terms. These both have x's in them. Now I'm going to find my constants. Plus 1, plus 1. So combine like terms, negative 8x and 6 more, negative 8 more negatives, is 16. So I have 16 negatives, or negative 16x. And then plus 1 is positive 2. So I have negative 16x plus 2. Number 9, same thing. I'm going to distribute the negative. So I have negative 6x, so this is going to stay the same. And then I'm going to distribute the negative. So the opposite of negative 2x is plus 2x. And the opposite of negative 4 is plus 4. Negative 6x plus 2x. And then I have negative 11 and positive 4. Let's combine my x's together. So I have a negative and positive, so I'm going to subtract. So 6 minus 2 is 4. So this should be an x. And then so I have 4x, and then there are more negatives, so it's negative 4x. Next I have negative 11 and 4. There's negatives and positives, so therefore I'm going to subtract in my head. So I get 7. There are more negatives, so therefore my answer is negative 4x minus 7. All right, to factor each expression by finding the GCF, okay? To factor means to divide or get out that number, the biggest number. So the GCF is the biggest or largest or greatest, right, number that you can divide by or pull out, right? So it's gonna look like something that you would distribute. So you would have a number like 5 and then x plus 4 or something like that. You would have a number here, parentheses, and then a variable and a number or something like that. So that's what it should look like. So I'm going to find the GCF of 5x. That would be 5 times x And the 5 would be just 5 times 1. Okay? So, what's similar between the 5x and the 5? So 5x and 5, I have 5 times x and 5 times 1. So the 5's are common, so that means that's my greatest common factor is 5. That's what you're going to put on the outside of the parentheses. What's left over goes in here. So my x is going to go here, and then my 1 is going to go here. How to determine what operation is right here. So that plus is going to go down into here. Okay, and that is your final answer for factoring. This next one, I have 10x. So this is 5 times 2 times x. Then I have 35. That's 5 times 7. Well, what's the greatest common factor? Well, I have a 2 times a 5 times an x. That's for 10x. Oops. And then I have 35, which is 5 times the 7. My greatest common factor, the only things I can circle is the 5, so the 5 will go on the outside. What's left over is I have this 2 and this x. So that 2x is going to go right here. And then what's left over on the bottom one, or the 35? It's the 7. What operation did I use? I used a minus, so that minus is going to go right here. And that is your factored expression. So I have 4x over here and 7. This would be 2 times x, and this would be just 7 times 1. There's nothing similar, so it can't be factored. This is in the simplest form. Okay? All right, so that's the end of the video. Please make sure that you understand and write down all your notes. If you are having trouble, please ask me and I can give you some extra problems, or we can work on it together so you can understand.